Great. Um, and then, so this is quite good, Trish, because I'm going to give a kind of storytelling of what we've been up to over the last 9 months, and then give some ideas as to where we're going in the next 6 months. So this really is a kind of hinge in terms of what we've been up to. And let's see. So we always start with this slide. It's really important, comes from Barry Cunliffe's book on the Western Atlantic peoples, and it's very much always, I always include it at the beginning to remind us that the Western Atlantic coast is a passageway for many of the peoples who have, our ancestors since the Ice Age, and that they have traveled, shared, communicated, journeyed, discovered along these different routes. And that this map is very much at the source of this work. Um, so today, yeah, I want to really just make a point about the journey that we've made so far. The idea for the group was discussed around the summer solstice last year, and we actually held our first meeting on the 12th of July of 2024, some weeks later. And so, in a very sort of gentle way, we've had many different presentations, and one of the things that we've really looked at has been, we began with, this question of what is the coastal experience. Um, we began by considering what a coastal bioregion might look like and to what extent it's similar or dissimilar with watershed. We talked in another of our sessions about liminality and this idea of rather than being situated around a river and a watershed in a specific place, we're very much between places and spaces. And this is one of the themes that came up in different ways, just whether it's as simple as the changeability of the ocean, whether it's the high tide or the low tide, whether it's the intertidal zone, whether it's a salt marsh, whatever, that we're always in a sort of state of flux. And so that liminality is, I think, something very profound that affects the way we think. And I would say, I would argue bioregionally with respect to the the sense of what a coastal bioregion might look like. We talked about, in that sense, changing coastlines. So this is actually the coastline of the region of Vannes in Brittany, in France. Um, if you look at the coastline, if you go back 7 or 8 thousand years ago, you'll find the coastline was completely different. So that's very much on the left. Um, where we will be in possibly 100 or 200 years is the image on the right as sea level rises. And so, in fact, all the monuments, the Neolithic monuments, which are so incredible in this area, will of course be submerged. But when they were actually built, they were not on the coast. They were actually rather slightly inland. So there is this huge movement again, this liminality, that the coast is something that is ever changing. We began to talk a little bit about the physicality of what a bioregional learning centre might look like from a coastal perspective. And I found this postcard, which still sits on my boat just in front of me, which I love greatly. But the idea of the lighthouse is something which is also very much a guiding principle. and something which I think I retain in my spirit. We are far from this in the reality of this project, but I feel that also the lighthouse is a kind of guiding light. And I think it would be lovely one day to imagine a physical center which is based around a lighthouse and which takes on both that symbolic aspect and also would be a place for sharing and exposing coastal knowledge. So we continued. In between times, there was an amazing seminar by Karine and Peter on their work in the North Sea coastal, and they gave us a very beautiful, presentation with their own vision for the North Sea. Since then, our group has oriented rather more towards the Western Atlantic for various reasons. And so within that, we started looking a little bit more at specific ecologies and specific forms of coastal life. And so one of our sessions was devoted to the history of oysters, actually based around a Nature paper which was recently published, which was looking at the history of the oyster beds in the Channel, around the British coast, the Western Atlantic, and their work, which was in part archival, from the descriptions given by sailors, by naturalists, we realize, in fact, how the oysters have been destroyed. The oyster beds have been systematically destroyed over the last sort of 150 years. Um, and this is important not only for the sake of the coastal ecology, but of course for the fact that these oyster beds, which were, so extensive, also formed a massive part of our coastal protection. And so by the overfishing and by destroying the oyster beds, um, also there was an increase in the vulnerability of many of the coasts. And this is not just a British story, this is, Western European. So this was another part of our storytelling. We looked at the stories of seagrasses. We looked at their biology and we looked at their ecology. Each of these episodes is actually a seminar. I mean, in our series, they're all in the resource hub, and so they are all recorded. If you visit the Western Atlantic Coastal Resource Hub in the design school, everyone is recorded, and there's a description. All the videos are there. So if you wish to go into any of these stories, they are all there for posterity within the design school as part of our knowledge commons, something that I'll come back to. So we continued with our seagrasses. We looked at the nature of beaches. It's another fascinating subject about the construction of beaches. I mean, going into this in more detail, because again, getting to know what are the physical aspects of such a bioregion. We looked at dunes. We looked at dune formation. Again, we were looking at the ecologies, we're looking at the plant communities, looking at the process of formation. So again, each of these things, each of these steps is sort of building up this vision. We then looked in a lot of detail at salt marshes. And with respect to salt marshes, we actually spent a couple of weeks on different case studies. So we looked in detail at the Parc Naturel Régional de Brière in the Loire, and then the Parque Nazionale de Doñana. Um, uh, so very close to, to the entrance to the Mediterranean. And then we also spent time looking at the Severn Estuary. And one of the things that came out, particularly in our looking at the Severn Estuary, was the kind of controls, the legal structures, all the kind of complexity that actually is involved in working on the coasts. So this is another difference, perhaps, with many of the inner bioregional projects. If you own the land, you have actually a great scope for being able to operate. But as soon as you get onto the coast, you have a whole series of legal provisioning um, to fulfill before you can actually do anything. And I'll talk a little bit about this in another context slightly later. But these are sort of different aspects of, and this is a very important, I think, aspect of the bioregioning within the coastal context, because there are these differences and they're absolutely crucial. So, having spent a lot of time looking at ecology, at salt marshes, at oysters, at seagrasses, the other thing, and I mean, this is very present in the work of Peter and Corinne on the North Sea, is of course the ancestral voyages and the ancestral voices. And this is something that brought me very much into this work. And one of the things that I grapple with, and I mean, I'll be quite honest, that I don't yet know quite what the relation is. But how do we, within the Bioregional project, incarnate these ancestral voyages? How do we incarnate? How do we hear the voices of our ancestors? And I think that this is, at least for me, in my vision, this is something which is absolutely fundamental to our wider project. So in this case, this photo comes from a film. It was made. In this case, Andy Tarbert is an archaeological adventurer. This was a film that was made with Neil Oliver and Shinice Sumara. They made a three-part film about the importance of the Orkneys in the British Neolithic. And here they made a boat out of cow and tree, and they actually sailed with this boat, which they made across the Pentland Firth, which is one of the most dangerous firths in the waters around the UK, because the waters of the Atlantic and the North Sea meet, and so you can have currents, you have whirlpools, you have storms. The current moves incredibly fast. So, for a small boat, as I say, made entirely out of natural products, this was quite an adventure, quite a challenge. But I felt that, and I feel that this represents the kind of ancestral energy that our ancestors, they hold for us when we connect with them. So we looked in three sessions. We looked at that journey. We looked at how they made their boat. We looked at the entire story. They did make it for those who didn't see that seminar. They did make it. I think it took them about 8 hours. It was an absolutely epic journey. But here on this map, we see different journeys because we know that in fact people were sailing in their boats, making small journeys. It's about 6 days journey from Orkney to the Hebrides. And so here you go from the Ring of Brodgar to Callanish. You can follow down, hopping from island to island, reach the Irish mainland, down to Newgrange, then across to Wales, then down to the Presley Hills, then of course down the Bristol Channel, Avebury, Stonehenge, the recently discovered flagstone site, cross the Channel, then we're off down to Brittany. So in fact, there are these amazing journeys, and of course we don't really have much evidence of them because the boats which they used were made of cow and tree, and therefore they left very little trace. So you do occasionally find remnants, and of course, I mean, down in the Solent, there's a guy, what's his name, Mumba, what's his name, Hugh Mumba, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of underwater archaeology down there. It's really amazing what they're doing, and where you can find anaerobic conditions, these things will be preserved. I mean, which is just extraordinary. But looking at that, one of the things that we also became aware of, we talked a lot about hieroglyphics, and of course, a lot of people talk about Neolithic art. They see forms like this, and they immediately talk about the abstract. Our Neolithic ancestors were into abstract art. And it was interesting. We looked at a seminar from an American scholar who was actually interested in fluid dynamics, who, when he first saw these, realized that these weren't, as far as he was concerned, abstract art. They were, in fact, representations of fluid dynamics, of waves, of riplets, of currents, and indeed, in certain cases, of whirlpools. So this is the Westray stone. This comes from Orkney. And then this is another example, which is very famous and which is currently placed just in front of the entrance to Newgrange in Ireland. And so there is, in his research, a lot of evidence to show that our ancestors reflected their maritime past through their carvings. And this is not only from Orkney and from Ireland, because we also find, if we go to Gavrenis in France, we also have these carvings. We also then, when we explore this even further, so this is a Swedish site. This is a boat-like tomb. This is a very interesting site where here. In fact, it's not a stone circle. It is literally like a stone boat. It's absolutely extraordinary. And then you also have in Caithness in the north of Scotland, you have what's called the horned tombs. So these are actually boat-like structures. And we've got a drawing of one of them here. This is Cot on the Orkney Isles. And these actually resemble in profile what's known as the horned umiak, which was a form of boat which is typical of the Inuit and northern peoples. So we see that the presence of the sea and the boat is not just it's not just about sailing, it's also about voyaging into the afterworld. So there's a very, very profound relationship between, between how they would nourish themselves, how they would navigate between different places. We also have to remember that, of course, as the ice receded, so um, a lot of the forest gradually built up in Western Europe, and so going through the forest. I mean, in terms of navigating the forest, you also have a problem. It's another good reason why most of the Mesolithic, so that is sort of 6,000-7,000 years before our era, the Mesolithic sites are generally on the coast because people have a plentiful supply of shellfish, they have plentiful fishing, and it's also this possibility of navigating from one place to another. So it's only with later clearing in the Neolithic that we begin to sort of move more in the interior. So in fact, the boat travel is incredibly central to our entire journey. And that though these are just different stones. These are different stones from various places in Portugal and in France, again illustrating just how often they represented their boats, their craft, which is really amazing. There are other stones with whales which have been depicted. So again, we often think of antelopes and horses and bison, but actually whales and boats were represented plentifully within the Mesolithic and the sorry, well, I mean the Neolithic in this case. So this is, I mean, here we've just been exploring and we've followed our own trace between ecologies and then also this sort of ancestral part of the work. Um, I want to now just go back a little bit to, earlier explorations, because the difficulty, I think, the challenge is finding, the narrative thread between all these things. And I think this is, little by little where we're going. And in that sense, I mean, I come back to, the importance of the bioregional knowledge commons, which is to say a common knowledge base which is shared between people who are working within the region. So how does that knowledge commons span the kind of subjects that we've been talking about? Well, in my early explorations, and this comes from one of the early seminars in this series, Here we're just looking at the coast north of Somerset in the UK. I've done a lot of mapping work on this. There are different regions, indications marked on this map. It comes, I've been using the felt platform. Some of this information comes from the felt watershed map. And here, I was just literally looking at different zones along the Somerset coast to see how one might begin to get some kind of bioregional mapping together. And so this was very much an exploration. What I subsequently discovered is that rather than taking this out and using graphics software, the best thing for me to do is to actually work directly in Felt myself. So I opened a Felt account and I've sort of begun the sort of long and slow and arduous journey of actually now integrating the kind of information that we have been gathering here in this group over the past 9 months into the felt platform. So for example, here, we're just looking, this is a map of the marine protection zones around the UK. That gives you an idea of just, you can get some really nice, precision. I've made these, these polygon forms. Unfortunately, it's on the free account. You can't, import, QGIS or JSON data. You're talking about sort of $200 a month to be able to do that. So it's a platform which I just don't have access to. I don't have the means for. But at the same time, this is clearly for me the way in which one way in which a bioregional commons, knowledge commons could be formed. So, for example, here we've got here we've got oyster restoration projects. So I am beginning to do, I've been doing the research to find out who is doing what, which project is happening where. And so these you can now add to this map. These have actually been added. And when you click on any one of these things, then you end up with a pop-up with a lot of information. You can also put links to projects and so on. So little by little, rather than a sort of static, if I go back to this first map, graphically, I was quite happy with that, except that it is completely static. There's nothing that I can do with this. And, it's great if you like for giving a talk, but actually, it's when we've got something like this, we've got something that is shareable and that actually I think a number of different users could actually contribute to, and we can actually start to build up a kind of real inventory of bioregional knowledge. So, it's early days. This is the work that I've just been slowly doing. Here you can see on my menu, I've got oyster restoration up here. I've got marine protection zones. So these are like layers in Photoshop. So, when you go there, you just click on that. And that, in fact, that's my marine protection zone. That's my marine protection zones. I've got them all over here. You can zoom right up, you can zoom right out, and so on. And then I've also got Mesolithic sites, Neolithic sites. All this has got to be entered. I've also got some national parks. I've got various things. You can put what data you like on this. It takes, it takes time because you have got to add point by point, whatever it is that you are doing. On the other hand, if you are building or if you are working as a team, then you can start to work on this map and actually build up something which is really visually useful and contains information. And we've got these nice little sort of pop-ups here, and you can put links into them. So for example, that could be an interactive link. You click on it, and that will take you to the site, to the website of the restoration project, for example. So in other words, this is actually quite an articulate sort of system. Now, I know that there are many different mapping systems that exist, but this is the kind of research that I've been doing to try and build this. There's another one. So you could see, you've got all kinds. And after that, what you put in there is up to you. You can put as much or as little as you want. But, I've been looking at location, who's the organizer, what is the funding, what is the aim, when is the project started, has it been completed, when do they terminate, whatever. So you can actually, and then as I said, links, you can also put in URLs to the actual project. So if you want, you could put in the name and address of the person who's running it. So it's actually quite a nice platform. You can get a lot of information in there, and I could just share that link with you, and you could click on the map and you could see it in its actual state. So it's actually I'm quite impressed. And I mean, for the people with the real McCoy, the real paid, I mean, when once you can import amazing data onto this platform. I had a trial for a week, and I managed to import all the data from the UK Geological Survey. So I had the entire geology, the bedrock geology of the UK on my map until I got an email from them saying that I had used too much data on the thing, and I think they closed my trial down. Anyway, but if you are actually a serious, I mean, what I'm saying by that is that actually, I mean, this platform is actually pretty solid, and that you can actually put serious data on. So, I mean, in terms of building a project, and then looking to further towards funding a project for a real bioregional commons, then there is good stuff that we can do with this. And I really enjoy working with felt. I feel really at home with it. I've loved the felt watershed project. It is totally amazing what they've got on their map. And so I mean, I'm just doing what I can with what I've got. So that takes me then to what on earth, that's where we've been. I mean, I've tried to give an idea of all the different steps over the last 9 months. Where are we going in the next 6 months? I mean, this is my sort of vision, and this is all, I mean, I'm just, this is what has sort of been channeled. So really, there are two things: networks and events. The first thing, I mean, I've joined various networks myself. I'm beginning to explore what they're up to. First of all, there's the CoStar network, which is a research network in the UK. Anyone can join the network. You get an email off them, but basically, we are talking about people who are funded many millions. It's quite big money. There are, I think, 4 or 5 major CoStar projects in the UK, run by different universities. There's one group. I can't remember now. I think if they're on, are they on the Humber? Who's basically, sort of, the kind of overseeing the whole lot. But the CoStar network is something that's taking place. So that's UK research. Um, there's also something which is really interesting called Ocean and Coastal Futures. Again, you can sign up and join this network. They do monthly seminars. Their last monthly seminar was really interesting. It was actually about um, legal considerations towards conservation projects. And it was fascinating because, in fact, one of the people there was from the London Zoological Society. They're doing a lot of projects, coastal projects. And then there were people from DEFRA and from the Environment Agency. And they were talking about the different frameworks and how people have to fill out different things, how they have to obtain licenses. And one of the things that clearly came up that the researchers were a bit, kind of frustrated by was just how much paperwork and administration there is in order to be able to get a marine or coastal project validated. Now, without going into any judgments, I mean, this is just good information to know, but I think that from a coastal bioregioning point of view, I think this information is really important. Um, I think that I mean, they are doing the seminar series again. They're free, they're open. If you're interested, join the network. And the seminars that I've attended have been really, really, really interesting. So there's some amazing speakers, and so I think there's a lot of good stuff there. So then, the Zoological Society of London. Now, I missed this in January. I mean, I was so upset. But anyway, I mean, because I didn't know about them. But anyway, they do twice a year. They do a seascape symposium. That's just started. The first one was in January. The second one is the 4th and 5th of June. So anyway, I've done the pre-booking. It's like £60, I think, for 2 days online. So that's going to be their next major 2 day symposium. It's being run by Joanna Preston, who's Prof of Marine Science at Portsmouth, I think. So, I mean, I heard her talking on one of the last seminars there. She is really, really, really good. I mean, really inspiring stuff. So I haven't got the program for this, but I am definitely going. I'm going to put £60 into that. And that is happening on the 4th and 5th of June. So for those of us who are interested in coastal, this is definitely going to be something to tune into. Um, so where does that take us? Well, basically, I mean, as the design school works with the learning journey, equinox to equinox, I'm also an extremely equinoctial person. And what I've been thinking, very much, I mean, I've been thinking about this for the last 3 months, was really to sort of open out to see how our sort of evolution would also flow, given that we started all this journey on the summer solstice last year. And so between the vernal equinox and the autumn equinox, we've basically got a period of 6 months. And really, what the way I see this, in short, is that this sort of point, and today really marks a sort of kind of assessment. It's a kind of summary. It's a waypoint on our journey because of the ancestral and the ecological work. We've got three main kinds of ecosystems: coastal ecosystems, oysters, seagrass, and salt marsh. There are others. Joanna Preston was talking about that. I'm trying to get in touch with her about this because it's really interesting what she's got to say. But we've got those three main sort of areas where people are working. Um, we've also got the ancestors. We've also got this ancestral dimension. Again, I'm not quite sure how this, what the weave is, but weave there will be. There is. There is for sure. I'm absolutely sure. And because in the end, looking after this is also in tribute to the ancestors and also being able to reconnect with them and also to be able to reconnect. I mean, we all know Stonehenge, blah, 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 Avebury, yes, all these sort of amazing megalithic structures. Yes, we know them, but they're all terrestrially based. And what we haven't actually integrated is our seafaring origins, that sort of coastal power. And I see that as being a huge dynamo in terms of our regeneration and the regeneration of a coastal bioregion. So, as I say, I haven't quite got how that articulates. But basically, in the next 6 months, as I say, in terms of what I'm channeling at the moment, from this point onwards, we have a period to really do mapping and to start to, I mean, I've built that basic platform on felt. Um, that can be within the context of a free subscription. We can build on that. Those who are interested in this kind of work, can build on this. So there's a lot of mapping to do in terms of that, the bioregional knowledge commons. There is the Seascapes meeting in the 5th of June, really a fortnight before the solstice. And then I think it would be lovely to do some kind of summer solstice celebration, which may be online or whatever, I have no idea, but there some kind of communal session in which we all bring something into the pot in terms of celebrating the coastal energies, shall we say. And I leave that completely open at this point. And then really where I feel that we're going, and I think this would be really good to sort of, close this period of 6 months, is what I call coastal bioregioning for the European Atlantic online event. And what I imagine that we could do within this group, is to imagine, I mean, it will doubtless be very modest. It can be a small group. We're not talking, we don't need 300 people. But it would be really good to start building, I think, towards a first coastal bioregioning for the European Atlantic meeting, either a half day or a full day, depending on how many people want to come into this and want to speak. But I am hoping in this that there will be space for people who do oysters, people who do seagrasses, people who are restoring waterlands and salt marshes, and for people who are thinking about our ancestors, and to weave this together into a very sort of, between the ancestors and the science, between the ecology and our love of the coasts. So something which is definitely not going to be the program that you would have for the London Zoological Society, but something which will be inclusive of what they are doing. Because what I want is for the people who are doing the science to be also hearing about, the maritime journeys of the ancestors, and I think that there is a weaving to do there which will be really helpful to everyone. So that is sort of my intuition. And so the way this, I mean, the sort of rough subjects that this is touching into, obviously mapping and coastal restoration, mapping archaeological sites and coastal, bringing that in. The question of a coastal information commons. There are many reasons why this is important, which I could talk about for hours, but I won't here. From the ancestors to coastal and marine science, bringing in those, weaving that story. And then, I mean, as this will be the sort of another point of, a still point, we've done 9 months, then 6 months. So then stepping onwards into 2026, and what would this group look like? What would be the projects? And so for that, I mean, I have, carried most of this work myself. I'm hoping that there will be within the new cohorts in the design school and others who I have perhaps not met, and certainly many in the design school who I haven't met. But to begin to build some volunteering into this, because as I say, I've carried a huge amount the last sort of 9 months, and I also need some support and help with, for example, creating these directories of oyster restoration sites and seagrass restorations and things like that. So, there's a really good job for someone, if somebody's really passionate about that, just say, right, well, we'll just go through and we'll work out, like, we get a list of, I don't know, 50 or 60 sites, all doing oyster restoration in the UK and Western Atlantic. Great, get that map, get that information on the felt map so that it's there for people. It's part of our knowledge commons. Um, there's work to be done on preparing this online meeting. I'm going to be doing that for sure. I'd love to be able to brainstorm the idea of what is a coastal information commons, what is the information that we really need, where does that go? It's not just scientific, it's not archaeological. How do we again get the ancestors in there? And what about people who live on the coast? What about flooding? What about coastal resilience? So there's a lot there. Um, Last part really is also to do with funding, and that I hope at some point this group will be able to find funding from one of the different, whether it's Co-Fund Eco or elsewhere. I've no idea at the moment. Because there's been a huge amount of work done over the past 9 months. I mean, it is absolutely massive. And so, to have some funding to do this would be, I mean, a massive comfort, and it would enable us then to think about being able to move into other spaces and do things with this. So that's really where I think we are. Yes. So that's it for today. So I'm going to stop my share there. Yeah, but that's so that,
Uh,
I mean, I think that's great that you're here, Trish, because you have now seen the complete panorama of what's been going on in this little crazy corner of the Western Atlantic. Um, but that, I mean, this is what we've been doing. And as I say, all the seminars, are there in the resource hub. and so everything has there's a trace of everything. Um, and I think that really, I mean, for me, I mean, just, in summary, I mean, I'd say that I like the idea of trying to organize either an online afternoon or an online day in September at the autumn equinox. Gives us 6 months to prepare that. I don't know, half a dozen talks, different people,
Mm-hmm.
and coming in from different perspectives. And I really hope to tap into the scientific community. I'd love Joanna Preston to talk. I mean, I know she must be super busy, but my God, she's so cool. And it was someone like that would just be brilliant. And there are loads of brilliant and inspired ecologists and, restorationists and regenerators and bioregioners. So, I'm going to be sort of shortlisting and seeing and then start writing to people. But I mean, it would
Mm-hmm.
be, like a real gift to this group if we can bring that together in a day in which we have our own little day with, as I say, a series of, do an online gathering to really celebrate the idea of this coastal bioregion and, take that, move that into the next year of work. So,
Yeah, fantastic, Pete. A question regarding funding, particularly with the BioFi uh, hub or initiative that's going on with R 3.0 and so on.
mhm.
Uh, um, is there any links there that might help? And I'm also thinking linking with the Eastern Atlantic on the other side. I know you've been connecting with the forests of the Northeast and Acadia. Uh, I guess collaborative work there because there's so many similarities of
I think there are a lot of very, very good reasons why to do that and that bridging. And yes, I mean, I'm actually part of the Forests of the Northeast group, and
yeah, I
I'm
knew you
actually
were, yeah.
collaborating with Roberta Hill. We're doing
Hmm.
Forest Knowledge Commons together. And the idea is looking at the Western Atlantic coastal rainforest and the evolution of the forests of the Northeast. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a sort of already, there's a kind of little bit of a parallel there, using, with the idea of teaching children, but actually working on those two coastlines. And I think that that would be a very nice synergy. And it might be that is the way then to then move into a sort of funding, place where we
That's
come
right,
from both sides of the Atlantic. Um,
right.
there's been some amazing oyster restoration in New York, for example. I mean, the crazy projects, in terms of coastal restoration and around New York. So, yeah, that could be a really,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I like it. Lovely.
Mm.
Thank you, Pete. Actually, I was with Roberta yesterday in a breakout. David, they've already received some funding, right? With BioFi, I think she said. Can you hear me, David? I can hear you. Anyway.
Um, yeah, I mean, the whole BioFi thing is, I feel it's way over my head. I'm intrigued, but I
Yeah.
love the analogy of you know finances flow. I get that part. It's just when it comes down to you know coins and pounds and dollars and
Yeah.
equivalents, that's a level of abstraction that I don't get. However,
But yeah.
and I know that other people have taken advantage of it, and I would love
Yeah.
to learn how to do that myself.
Mm.
I think it's helpful, yeah, when Joe conducts those meetings. I've attended a few, but I think Roberta was mentioning that she had to do some checkup with the group. So, Pete, do you know if her thing is already a pilot in the BioFi or no?
I'm not
Yeah,
sure. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
I have to
I know
check. I
that
have to
our
ask her
work,
again.
our work has been, I mean, my work with Roberta was supported with the funds from the design school going to phone. um,
Mhm.
as part of that meeting, which was held in the Tikaronto when they had that big meeting with Joe and Penny, and so there was support going out to different I think five or six different bioregions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And no, I'm confused, by the,
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing that I do feel is that while we could probably do an online meeting without having any expenses, because I already pay my Zoom account, so I've got that. After that, sort of we're all doing loads of volunteering and so on and so forth. But I think at some point, then, where there is a direct need for a specific piece of funding, then I think that sort of it almost answers itself. Because you say, like, we can't actually advance until we've done this. And so you then say, right, well, how much is that going to cost? And then
Yeah,
you sort of, so at the moment, I think while, our journey here, is very long and gradual, there's reason for that in that, we're doing the kind of background work. I'm beginning to sort of, feel into these things. And also, I think that, this question of the legal issues, at least in the UK, is absolutely massive because they
mm,
really do stop people from doing, a lot. You can't
yeah,
just go and regenerate. Part of that is because people don't, I think it depends who owns the coast. And a lot of the coast is
yeah.
actually owned by the royal estate.
Mm-hmm.
And
But Pete,
yeah.
from what I understand, there's definitely for this with the journey, a push and some funding available for the design immersion piece. So if you were looking at September to do afternoon or 1 day or 2 day or talks,
Mhm.
is it complicated or a totally different story to think that maybe it could also be that 20 or 30 people are coming to a piece of the coast that you choose for whatever reason you choose, and this isn't actually physical
Yeah,
encounter. Mm, go ahead.
my problem there, one problem is that I don't actually at this time live on the coast. I've often lived on the coast, but at this present time I don't. And that makes life actually quite complicated. You could then ask, why am I doing this? But as I say, I have my own coastal reasons, which go right the way back to, I was born on the Clyde. And so the coastal, my childhood was spent on the coast, all the different, North Sea coast and the western coast of Scotland. But in terms of that, you see, that is a complicated thing to organize, and I feel that we're not yet there. I think that after a 1 day online event, and it might be that, for example, there are people, let's say, around Portsmouth, or that, we've got like a small group, and then we sort of say, well, look, it would actually be really good if we plan and then we do like a day or an immersion in Portsmouth or something like that. That's where we could then, it should design itself. I think at the moment, I feel, at least in terms of my own, being trying to design something like that where I'm not on, in the place, it's super complex. But I
Yeah,
think
and
that
that's
after,
yeah,
but I think that ultimately, that is, that's where we're going, definitely.
yeah,
But I think we're not quite there yet. And I think, there are obvious reasons why it's great, if you happen to be living in the middle of your, watershed
yeah,
or whatever, and then people you just got, and you've got space or you've got a place where people can meet and it just makes life kind of a lot
yeah.
easier.
But so what I want to repeat to you, like I'm really interested in the oyster restoration. So, and definitely with France
Hmm.
and the French coast and what the EU has been doing. If you'd like, I can help gather information. But for instance, if there were a couple of strategic partners, like two oyster project, one in England, South,
Hmm.
and then one in Brittany, that the group will get closer with.
Exactly.
So then they could also become the place where we do a 1 day or 2 day, because then we do the work
Sure.
at the Oyster project, wherever on the coast it is. That could be interesting,
Yeah.
because it wouldn't be as expensive.
Yeah. No, well, I think something like that will, my feeling is that it will evolve naturally, as in, if we take this slowly, step by step, and I think, my hope is to have people from Ireland, Scotland, UK, France, Spain, Portugal, all coming in to talk about different things. And it's easier for me because I obviously speak French. So, in terms of communicating with the French, that's going to be fine. My Spanish is not sufficiently existent at the present time. My Portuguese definitely not. So, the answer is, but we want to be creating those cross-coastal links. Definitely. I think it's going to be really exciting when that starts to happen and this group starts to join up with different people, coming in.
I'd be interested in seeing where uh, Western Africa, Northwest Africa fits in and connects, because I know that's another whole area of nationalism and decolonization and so on that would play into it.
Mhm.
But just those ancestral journeys would be really interesting.
Mm.
And the interaction, European, African, it's a long, unhappy history, but it could be part of a reconciliation as well.
That's a powerful thought.
I think I
I
sense
think,
like
sorry.
I was going to say, I kind of sense same as you, Pete, that if by reaching out to do the small of it, it's this the self-organizing will begin, the invitation to seed by approaching people, asking people whether they're in the scientific community or whether architecture or something, to demonstrate, as you said, the weave of the narratives will open up the possibilities when other people can see how these connections can be made across the coast to America, down the coast towards the Mediterranean, or as David was saying, even across to the north coast of Africa. It is like the design school is the you it happens by doing,
Mhm.
and it will start to self-organize just like the design school has started to self-organize, and that those are kind of the thoughts that I'm having about where my own bioregion might be, is just starting those conversations and going to volunteer days and having conversations with people who are already working in those bioregions.
Mm.
And the same as Emmanuel was saying, the oyster group on the French coast, the oyster group on the English coast, and I think it will start to happen because really the links are already there. We're just not seeing them.
Mm. Yeah. No,
As in, one of the reasons for doing the bioregioning is it makes these things transparent, whereas they've got false silos
Yeah.
or ways of seeing things.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also, guys, if we put, for instance, if we had a big space and we put all the people and the volunteers who are spending time and growing MPAs around the world, that's also a great connective link. Oysters, renovate or restorers. Yeah, but how many MPAs in the world? Like, even remember that EU document I shared with you? MPAs within marine protected area within Europe, and how they are already, we don't even know, I think. Of course, they're connected, with social media or groups or like trading people, internship. There's always, I think, a very vibrant existing
Mm.
going back and forth the coast, America, Europe, and West Africa. I can feel that. We need to get to know them more, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the occasion for doing a day is, or a day or a half day, whatever, to create a program that people would like to speak to, which will take them into a different place, and that means phrasing. So, while often, I mean, I know from my scientific past, I mean, people generally speak about what they've been working on, and they give, often people give the same seminar again and again and again, and so on and so forth. And so it's actually, it's finding that invitation which actually gives them a little bit more space to say things that they wouldn't normally be able to say, because normally they would have to, frame it within a very sort of strict, sort of cadre, and actually have a little bit more space. And
Mm.
I think um uh, as I say, I mean, I'm going to be looking, at specific people, what they're doing, what they've been publishing, where they are in the sort of different things. I think it'll be very interesting, for example, at the Seascapes Day, because there are going to be a lot of people talking about all these kind of things. So that's also going to open up for me. And it's brilliant, I mean, that they do that and they offer a Zoom thing. I mean,
Mm,
it's so good because it could again be one of those things where you've got to be there and, and can you, I mean, I wouldn't be able to either afford or, and just handle the logistics of going to London for 2 days to do that. I mean, even
mm,
a small meeting, so the fact that there is a Zoom option is brilliant. And that means that there will
yeah.
be many other people coming in from different places, and so, I mean, that's the weave.
Mm. But also, I don't want to take all time, but what I'm interested in with the work that we're doing parallel and with the school is that when you do that, I'm sure you will engage more people to join the design school and join the journey if they wish
Hmm.
um, to do so. But then the conversation that we had about, the amazing amount of time and hours that you spend doing that research, how can you and other people who are doing get paid not by the school, but get paid, or maybe by the school, to provide an income for the work that we do. And when I mentioned that to Penny, when I told her about how amazing each presentation were, and that on their own, they're like, I wish that a lot of people would see them in the school. How many people have seen them? We don't know. They're there for people to
They
see, but
Five or six people see them each time. I mean, I know because I can
but
see on my.
she's interested. She's interested, and she asked me, "How would you like to do it?" I say, "Why don't we?" Because there's so much rich stuff going on in the school, and a lot of our members are active, as Joe was saying. But yeah, there's a part of them that are not active. But how do we get them to, hey, remember to watch the oyster, the dunes, the marshes? So
Mm,
all the amazing resources that you put together
mm,
could are already things that could be shared again with a little magazine or novella where you tell people, look,
mm,
really go look. And also maybe, and that's just an idea I started having a few weeks ago, because I was really looking on how to build online courses, what one those online courses that you build,
mm.
that you promote, and then people just buy it when you're asleep, or how with the material that you have already put together, there's something that you could maybe create if you're interested or produce so people start to click a button where they spend, I don't know, 47 pounds, whatever,
Mhm,
$97, and they have this thing,
mm,
and then maybe one time they have you live or
mhm.
they come to our hub, so we can, that's also amazing. And that's a way for us to generate money while continuing the work,
Well,
because
it
you
may
have all of
be
it.
a way to generate finance for doing this. Yeah, definitely. Um, I mean, I think it's a very interesting discussion. I've also suggested, I mentioned it in one message, that I think there is a question because, I mean, for those of us, the hubs work in different ways. Some hubs are conversational and really it's absolutely in the flow. It's like a kind of campfire. And then there are others where people are preparing material, like Joe's seminars. And I mean, there's a huge amount of work that goes into the learning journey. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion, and um, my intuition is that this will evolve. But I think that at some point, you're right. An actual in-person immersion, I think it's too soon this year. And as I say, it would be easier if I was living on the coast, but I'm not. And that is an issue, unfortunate. But that's just the way it is. And but I think an online whatever gathering in 6 months is a really good first step. And it's also a time to reach out to people who probably don't know about bioregions, have definitely not thought about the Western Atlantic coast as a bioregion, possibly don't know what a bioregion is, full stop, who have been doing really good bioregional work in their area, whether it's through, salt marsh restoration or whatever. And I think offering a sort of bigger picture, because somehow, as I said, this really came across in the oceans, oceans seminar, um, the legal framework seminar, that it can go so quickly, and then you're up to Environment Agency, and you're in legal this and framework that, and then you've got, somebody's building I don't know, a wind farm, and then you're talking about billions of, funding, and the levels, I mean, it's just, and so those things, you've got this around the Severn Estuary at the moment. There's new talk about whether they want to do a barrage, and then there's also a huge thing around Hinkley Point, the nuclear plant being built by the EDF, and they want to flood part of the coast as a sort of reparation for the impact of the nuclear power station, except that there are people who live there and they don't actually want to be flooded. So, you've got these sort of, I mean, but there you're working at the level of the state. I mean, it's the Ministry of, the Environment, it's like, the EDF, you've got these huge sort of corporations and governmental things. And then you've got three oyster catchers and two sandpipers who are sort of sitting there on the beach going, what are they talking about, these people, And it's sort of that, you know, th- so somehow we've got to kind of, I don't know, bring it down to a sort of a human scale again, and
Mm,
and and in a way. And I mean, this is also with, CoStar funding. These are big projects, 12
mm,
million, 14 million. I mean, it's great that the scientists are actually getting some funding. I mean, I celebrate that for them, but you are talking about program grants, and you are
yeah.
talking about big sort of stuff. And so otherwise, we lose any kind of connection and control of
Mm,
our coasts, and the only thing we can do is sort of basically go and do litter picking. And that
yeah.
I am totally not in agreement with.
Yeah. But Pete, I have two things, and I don't want to take all the time. The two things that come up to me. One, it doesn't really matter that you don't live by the coast, on the coast or not. And that's the whole thing about bioregion. It's like nobody, I mean, you know the coast, you were there when you were a kid, you used to live there. Okay, so you don't live by the coast now, you live by a canal.
Yeah,
So, okay, so people couldn't come to a land immersion on your land or on your coast.
yeah.
But it doesn't really matter because we could do a gather. No, I'm not saying to do it this year, but in 26, that you don't live on the
Yeah, but
coast,
I
I
think
think is not that important.
this we will get there.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, I
also
think this
and
is
then the
where this is
second
being
part,
born, and I think
yeah,
we need just to move into this gently because it may be that there is
yeah,
somebody else on the coast who
yeah,
says, "Hey, look, great, I can provide that," and we'll,
yeah,
we just,
exactly.
it's sort of, I think that, this is just the birthing process,
Yeah.
and I think
No,
that
it's a
for
beautiful
some,
birthing process.
if I was living on the Somerset coast, I mean, it would be so much easier for me to sort of, imagine something like that. Let's say, or in Cornwall, but it's sort of like it's the birthing process, and
Mm.
I think that also. I know one or two people. I know one or two people said, like, well, this group was like, it's very slow. And I said, yeah, it is slow, but like we move with the tides, and there
Yeah,
is actually a sort of sense of an unfolding because there's a lot of discovery. I mean, there's a discovery for me, and there is a sort of a journey. But I mean, for me, the beauty of this is that I don't have a fixed idea about how this
yeah,
should, what form this should be. And I have done everything in my power. If I've done one thing positively, it's not to hold that vision of something concrete, like this is where it's
mm,
going. It's actually been about allowing these, suddenly I'll have an idea, oh yeah, maybe that's what we'll do next time, and then that sort of invites something else in. And so I've actually actively cultivated the sort of deep spirit of not knowing in order to be guided by
yeah,
allowing the oysters to, because I mean, I mean, somebody posted on LinkedIn, and I was actually that article by Joanna Preston. And I mean, I read that and I thought, oh, wow, that's like so amazing, well, that's where we're going next time, and it's sort of like, it's like soul tracking, where you're getting the
yeah,
inspiration. And I sort of, what's guiding this for me anyway, is this deep sense of the sort of our maritime ancestors. It's the coastal ancestors, and it's their voice that's coming through. And so
mm,
how, I it sort of just feels like it's happening, and this is why this particular session is particularly, amazing, in that for the first time that there is a sort of an element of projection, but I want it to be as sort of as fuzzy as possible, so that
mhm,
just the idea that, okay, we'll have a day and it's close to the autumn equinox and it will be online, so basically, everybody has the best possible chance of being there, and it's not going to cost anybody anything. And it's, and like, then can we get like a really amazing dream team of coastal dreamers to come together,
mm,
oyster people, seagrass people, ancestral people, and bring that into an unfolding and a weave. And that, I mean, it could be a yearly event. It could be the yearly autumn equinox event for
Yeah.
the coastal
mm,
group, which is a beautiful thing. But as I say, it's small and simple and gentle. And from that, we could spring into an immersion, I think, in 2026,
yeah.
definitely.
David,
What
do you
I'm,
mind? Okay, go ahead.
go ahead, please.
I was going with the second point. That was really quick
Okay,
because I was
okay.
making 2 points. The second point, Pete, is like maybe because I'm the EU girl, but I don't really worry that much about the legal ramification. But I see you work with the hub as a communication, education arm or entity. I mean, hopefully one day together we'll do some work, physical work of restoration, the dunes. I see you like, and actually Ralph is using the lighthouse keeper. I think his newsletter is the lighthouse keeper, but as someone with the group, the hub, who is going to point and say, hey, look, those people, oyster people, ancestor people, pagan people are working together. So like you're almost like a communication agency or a knowledge commons of what's happening here and there. So all the legal risk and consequences of doing that, your partners, the oyster people, the restoring people, would already have hopefully dealt with
Sure.
that you don't have to worry too much, I think.
No, I mean, I think it's just a sort of an awareness. I think as much, I mean, it's something that surprised me as to actually how much legislation there is around these different zones. And so I think, I mean, I'm now understanding, of course, one of the things that, why, for example, Rewilding Britain want to work with landowners is because once they've got someone who's, is into rewilding and basically they own, 2,000 hectares or whatever, they just get on with it because there's no way, no one can stop them. I mean, unless they were going to sort of set up an airport or something on their land, but basically, I mean, unless they want to do something so totally outrageous. But in fact, that sort of facilitates, and I think what surprised me was just actually how much control there is on the coastal regions. And I mean, I mean, I'm not exactly a complete sucker for sort of, legal seminars, but I mean, I was absolutely astonished at the problematics of this. And I think we need to find a sort of positioning somehow, because I think it is relevant. Um,
Hmm.
and one of the things that struck me since I started doing this was, first of all, looking at the what's called the ArcGIS coastal mapping for the UK, which is about, all the different sort of, the coastal resilience. And then you go down to the shore management plans. And I can tell you that nobody understands an absolute freaking thing because it is so complicated. It is like, I mean, it makes Alice in Wonderland sort of rabbit holes. I mean, it makes that look sort of, it's like kids play. This is so serious in terms of, and that means that people haven't got a clue. They don't
Mm.
know what is supposed to be going on. It is
Mm.
all invisible, contained in a kind of, strange ArcGIS file somewhere on the government's website. And so how we actually find ways into that, I mean, that's sort of part of my interest and seeing where it's possible. And as I say, it's not a critique because governments do what governments do and they've got all their, IT experts and so on. It's just sort of trying to find out how we can weave with that. That's what I would say. It's just awareness. That's all. There's no
Mm.
David.
Yeah. Um, so what's coming to me is a kind of hospicing modernity scenario
Okay.
where we have the machinery of modernity with all its barrage and floodings and improving nature, and then we've got the Shambhala warriors
Mm,
who are restoring spirit
mm,
to the land. And then you mentioned how much of the coast was controlled by the royals. So you got King Chuck, who's all in for ecology and restoration. Get him on your side, right? And might be able to work through the legal um, um, spaghetti.
yeah.
I'm just thinking how we can do this from as you said, framework. I think it is framing the issue. We have this ancestral journey,
Mm,
which has created this wonder
mm,
that has been 400 years of modernity has been eating away of our minds and our spirits and our bodies.
mm,
And there is a contingency that are not all, you know, crazy maypole dancers, but real serious people. I'm not saying that maypole dancers are not serious, but they're a kind of a fringe minority as far as popular culture goes.
mm,
Um, but you know what I mean?
mm,
It's there's I think there is a contingency that is eager,
mm.
and we are all aware of we're witnessing the end of the world as we know it.
We are. Oh, yeah.
Everyone is aware of it. I don't unless they've been asleep, and so or too afraid to think about it.
Mm,
But it is dying,
mm,
and so what can we imagine is replacing it?
mm,
And I think we're onto something
mm.
here with this respect for the the oyster catchers and the sandpipers,
The oyster catchers and the sandpipers. Yeah,
and it's not romantic.
it isn't at
I
all.
think that's another thing we got to be careful of, to fall into romanticism. I think it's very practical, very, very practical.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen,
But you
we've
know,
almost come to the end of our slot. So, um,
Thank you.
for me, just
yes,
thank you all for being here and for your support and for this lovely conversation. Let me just pass the last words to yourselves, and then we'll end the recording. So, who would like
I,
to?
I can just say something, Pete. I would like to, and maybe it's a way to see who within the school would like to maybe still join the hub or participate more if you or we were going to make a call,
Hmm.
another call for action.
Hmm.
And for instance, what I'm interested in, your hub is one of my favorite hubs. And one of the things that I'd be interested in doing in my own research and discovery and exploration is to work more on oyster and different coastal work happening, maybe more in France, perhaps, or, because I'm also looking at Portugal and maybe,
Hmm.
South Portugal, and also to work more on the history of paganism in Europe. And so figure out who are the crowd of people who are really the writers, the historian, the coastal historian. I'm sure we could come up with a list of 10, who
Hmm.
are there all the time, and how can we connect with them and read more and just let them know that we
yeah,
exist. Yeah. That's what I would like to do. Thank you.
yeah. I'm concerned that the work you're doing can be seen as esoteric, and that I think teaming up with Roberta on the American coast, I think, can give it more of a solidity and immediacy. I think maybe immediacy is what I'm looking for,
Hmm.
and engage imagination in a different way than uh, looking into the past. Oh, it's all very interesting, everything, but actually, it's you're looking into the future.
Hmm.
Okay, and I love the fact, Pete, that it's evolving. There is no plan. The things bubble up and come to you, and I love that. And that's the kind of approach I'm taking with birthing my bioregion. And yes, this idea of rigor and imagination at the same time feels very magical, just like that. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you. Thank you all. I'm just going to close the recording now. Hang on.